When people discover that I've visited a lot of gardens, invariably they suggest ones that I haven't been to. And the name that has cropped up over the years more than any other is Ninfa. So last year, I did go and see it, and I was staggered. It's simply gorgeous. And whilst, of course, there's great debate about which is the most beautiful garden in the world, there's no doubt which is the most romantic. For 1,000 years, Ninfa was an important town on the main road between Naples and Rome. At its early 14th century peak, before the Black Death ripped through Europe, it was owned by the Caetani family and had a castle, 7 churches, 14 towers, town hall, mills, 150 houses and around 2,000 inhabitants, all of which made it a substantial town. Then disaster struck. In 1381, Ninfa was sacked by mercenaries and pillaged by neighbouring towns. The remaining inhabitants, much reduced by plague and riddled with malaria from the surrounding marshes, evacuated it for healthier, safer ground. The Caetani family retained ownership, but for nearly 6 centuries it lay abandoned with the buildings submerged like beneath the tangled undergrowth. This is a town where people lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, where people died by the hundred. And they're ghostly. You're walking the streets where Romans walked, where medieval man, where people fought. And there are just layers upon layers of memories in amongst the buildings, just like there are layers upon layers of plants. You don't want to speak too loudly, not because you're disturbing other people, but you don't want to disturb your own sensitivity. Ninfa was not wholly ignored. Visitors came to admire its melancholy decay, and the nonsense writer and painter Edward Lear described it in 1840 as one of the most romantic visions in Italy. The transformation into a garden began in 1905 under the guidance of Prince Galassio Caetani. Galassio took on the enormous task of clearing the buildings from the undergrowth. But the garden as we see it now was started by his sister-in-law, Marguerite, who planted on a grand scale. And her daughter Leila expanded Ninfa into its modern state after the Second World War. In medieval times, they repeatedly would get plague, and this was a low-lying area, so there was lots of malaria, and the town would be isolated from time to time. And to get food in, it had to come by the river, but they couldn't come right through. So this bridge was adapted to cater for that eventuality. And to come up here, you can see that they built into the bridge, and these are town walls, so this is the edge of the boundary. No one could go out, no one could come in. But they built in the bridge these vents, these openings, and what they did was lower baskets down on ropes to boats that would come from nearby with supplies. And then up here on the bridge, from the edge of the town, looking in, you have one of the most stunning views in any garden ever in the world. The way that Ninfa is maintained is a brilliant balancing act, preserving the picturesque sense of ruin and loss with great subtlety, while scrupulously maintaining the fabric of the place. I've gone off piste a bit. If you visit the garden, you go on a set route and admire all the obvious best bits, but I like it if you can get behind the scenes a little bit. The whole place is gardened really carefully, and in fact, all this, I know, is very carefully assessed and considered.